Marcus Rivera adjusted his tie for the third time that morning, glancing at his reflection in the glass case containing what the museum proudly called the finest collection of extraterrestrial artifacts in the Western Hemisphere. He snorted softly at the pretentious description. After 5 years of leading tours through the Meridian Museum of Cosmic Antiquities, he'd learned to deliver the spiel with just enough enthusiasm to satisfy visitors while maintaining his own sanity. The morning sun streamed through the museum's massive skylights, casting an ethereal glow over the alien exhibits. Marcus had to admit the lighting department knew their job. Even the most mundane pieces looked mysterious and otherworldly in this carefully orchestrated atmosphere. Too bad none of it was real. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus called out as a group of tourists gathered around him, "welcome to the Meridian Museum's crown jewel, the Nexus Gallery, home to the most extensive collection of verified extraterrestrial artifacts on Earth." He paused for dramatic effect, letting his voice carry through the hushed space. "Of course, verified is a relative term in archaeology." A woman in the front row raised her hand. "Are you saying these aren't real alien artifacts?" Marcus flashed, his most charming smile, the one that had gotten him through college and into this job despite his degree in comparative literature rather than archaeology. "I'm saying that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and sometimes what we call alien is simply something we don't understand yet. But let's not let skepticism ruin the wonder, shall we?" He gestured grandly toward the first display case, which contained what appeared to be crystalline formations that pulsed with an inner light. "These are the veil crystals, discovered in the Atacama Desert in 2019. Notice how they seem to respond to human presence, as if on cue." The crystals brightened slightly as the tour group approached. Marcus knew it was just a proximity sensor, but the effect never failed to impress. "Wow," breathed a teenage boy, pressing his nose against the glass. "Are they really from another planet?" "According to the carbon dating, they're approximately 50,000 years old," Marcus replied, smoothly sidestepping the question. "Far older than any known human civilization that could have created such technology." He led the group deeper into the gallery, past displays of strange metals that seemed to shift color in the light, geometric artifacts that defied conventional understanding of physics, and what appeared to be alien artwork depicting beings that looked almost, but not quite, human. "And here," Marcus announced as they reached the gallery's centerpiece, "we have our most fascinating exhibit, the Eternal Sleeper." The display dominated the center of the room, a raised platform surrounded by a circle of smaller artifacts. Upon it lay what appeared to be a humanoid figure, preserved in some kind of crystalline cocoon. The being was tall and elegant, with features that were hauntingly beautiful despite their alien nature. High cheekbones, elongated limbs, and skin that seemed to shimmer with an opalescent quality. Most striking were the delicate markings that covered the visible portions of the being's skin, intricate patterns that looked almost like tattoos, but seemed to shift and flow. When viewed from different angles, this remarkable specimen was discovered in a sealed chamber beneath the Nazca Lines in Peru. Marcus continued, warming to his favorite part of the tour. "The preservation is so perfect that she appears to be merely sleeping rather than dead. Local legends speak of a star queen who fell in love with a human prince and was cursed to sleep until true love's kiss awakened her." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Classic fairy tale elements. Of course, the scientific explanation is far more mundane, some kind of advanced preservation technique that we haven't been able to replicate or fully understand." An elderly man in the group squinted at the display. "Has anyone tried to wake her up?" "The museum's policy is strictly hands-off," Marcus replied. "These artifacts are priceless and potentially fragile. We observe, we study, we speculate, but we don't touch." A young couple exchanged glances, and the woman whispered something to her partner that made him grin. Marcus caught the tail end of their conversation. Something about true love's kiss and sleeping beauty. Now, Marcus said with a theatrical wink, "before anyone gets any romantic ideas, I should mention that our security system is quite sophisticated. Any unauthorized contact with the exhibits triggers an immediate lockdown." As if summoned by his words, a security guard appeared at the edge of the gallery, making his rounds. Marcus waved briefly at him. Peterson, a decent enough guy who'd been working the museum longer than anyone could remember. The guard nodded and continued on his way. "If you'll follow me," Marcus said, preparing to lead the group to the next section. "We'll move on to the artifact chamber, where we have some truly puzzling items that..." He trailed off as he noticed the teenage boy from earlier had lingered behind, staring intently at the eternal sleeper. There was something in the kid's expression that made Marcus pause, not the usual tourist fascination, but something deeper, almost like recognition. "Something wrong?" Marcus asked, approaching the boy. "She's dreaming," the teenager said softly, not taking his eyes off the display. "Can't you see it? Her eyes are moving under her eyelids." Marcus glanced at the preserved figure and felt a chill run down his spine. For just a moment, he could have sworn he saw exactly what the boy was describing. The subtle movement of eyes beneath closed lids, the almost imperceptible rise and fall of breath. But that was impossible. The being had been dead for millennia. "Trick of the light," Marcus said, more to convince himself than the boy. "The museum's lighting system is designed to create atmosphere. Sometimes it creates illusions." "Maybe," the boy said, but his tone suggested he wasn't convinced. "What do you think she's dreaming about?" "She's not dreaming anything," Marcus replied firmly. "She's dead, has been for thousands of years." But even as he said it, Marcus found himself studying the alien figure more closely than he ever had before. There was something about her face, peaceful, yes, but with an underlying sadness that seemed to speak of loss and longing. The crystalline cocoon that surrounded her wasn't just preservation technology, he realized. It was beautiful, artistic, almost like a shrine. "Sir?" The rest of the tour group was waiting for him, beginning to look restless. "Right, sorry," Marcus said, shaking himself back to the present. "Come along then. The artifact chamber awaits." As they walked away, Marcus couldn't help but glance back at the eternal sleeper. The teenager's words echoed in his mind. "She's dreaming." Ridiculous, of course. But then why did he suddenly feel like he was the one being watched? The rest of the tour passed in a blur of professional patter and rehearsed jokes. Marcus found his attention drifting repeatedly back to the central gallery, to the mysterious figure in her crystal cocoon. When the tour finally ended and the visitors dispersed, he stood alone in the corridor, fighting an unexpected urge to return to the exhibit. "Stupid," he muttered to himself. 5 years of leading tours, and now I'm getting spooked by a mummy." But even as he tried to dismiss his unease, Marcus found himself walking back toward the Nexus Gallery. The museum was quieter now, between tour groups, and his footsteps echoed in the empty corridors. He told himself he was just being thorough, checking to make sure everything was in order after the tour. The eternal sleeper lay exactly as she had for the past 5 years, unchanged and unchanging. But now, alone in the gallery, Marcus felt something he'd never experienced before, a sense of connection, as if the being behind the glass was somehow aware of his presence. "You're losing it, Rivera," he whispered to himself. "Next thing you know, you'll be believing in alien abductions and crop circles." Almost without thinking, he approached the display case. The museum's security system would prevent him from actually touching the exhibit, but there was nothing stopping him from getting close. The crystalline cocoon seemed to pulse with its own inner light, and the alien figure's skin appeared to shimmer with an opalescent quality that seemed almost alive. "What's your story?" Marcus found himself asking aloud. "Who are you? What happened to you?" The gallery remained silent, but Marcus could have sworn he felt something, a presence, a consciousness, something that suggested the being before him was more than just a preserved corpse. The rational part of his mind, the part that had guided him through years of skeptical tour-giving, screamed warnings, but something deeper, something more primal, urged him forward. "I don't believe in fairy tales," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't believe in curses or sleeping queens or any of that nonsense." But even as he spoke, Marcus found himself reaching toward the display case. His hand hovered over the control panel that would temporarily disable the security field around the exhibit. All it would take was his employee access code, and he could. "What are you doing?" The voice made Marcus jump. He spun around to find a young woman standing at the entrance to the gallery. Her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and her arms crossed. She wore the simple gray uniform of the museum's research staff, and her expression was a mixture of curiosity and concern. Nothing, Marcus stammered, stepping back from the display. Just checking the exhibit, making sure everything's in order after the tour. The woman raised an eyebrow. By disabling the security field, I wasn't, Marcus began, then stopped. There was no point in lying. I don't know what I was doing. Something about that exhibit has been bothering me all morning. The woman approached, her expression softening slightly. I'm Elena Vasquez from the research department. I've been working with the alien artifacts for the past 2 years. She glanced at the eternal sleeper, then back at Marcus. And you're the tour guide who doesn't believe in aliens, Marcus Rivera, he said, extending his hand. And I don't not believe in aliens. I just think most of what we call alien has more mundane explanations. Elena shook his hand, her grip firm and warm. Most of the time, I'd agree with you. But there are some things here that defy conventional explanation. She nodded toward the display. Like her. What do you mean? The preservation technology. For one thing, we've run every test we can think of, and we still can't figure out how it works. The crystalline matrix should have degraded millennia ago, but it's as strong as the day it was created. And the biological readings, she paused, as if deciding whether to share something. What biological readings? Elena glanced around the gallery, making sure they were alone. This doesn't leave this room. Understand? The museum board would have my head if they knew I was sharing preliminary research with a tour guide. Marcus nodded, suddenly very interested. She's not dead, Elena said quietly. Not in any conventional sense. There's measurable brain activity, cellular regeneration, even what appears to be a heartbeat. Slow, maybe one beat every few minutes, but definitely there. Marcus felt the world tilt slightly. That's impossible. That's what I thought too. But the instruments don't lie. Elena moved closer to the display, her voice dropping to a whisper. I think she really is sleeping. Waiting. For what? I don't know. But I have a theory. Elena's eyes met his, and Marcus saw excitement mixed with something that might have been fear. What if the local legends are right? What if she really is waiting for someone to wake her up? Marcus stared at the alien figure, his mind racing. If Elena was right, if the being was truly alive and waiting, then everything he'd believed about the museum's exhibits was wrong. And if the legends were true, you think someone could actually wake her up? I think, Elena said carefully, that the preservation technology might be designed to respond to specific stimuli, physical contact, perhaps, or even something as simple as touch. They stood in silence for a moment, both staring at the eternal sleeper. Marcus felt a pull unlike anything he'd ever experienced, as if the being in the crystal cocoon was calling to him specifically. It's crazy, he said finally, completely insane. Elena agreed. The museum would fire us both, probably sue us for damages too. Marcus looked at Elena, saw his own curiosity and reckless excitement reflected in her eyes. But what if we're right? What if she's really waiting to be awakened? Elena bit her lip, clearly wrestling with the same impulse that was overwhelming Marcus. The security system cycles through a maintenance mode every day at 2:47 p.m. For exactly 3 minutes, the field around the exhibit is disabled for deep cleaning. Marcus glanced at his watch. 2:40 for p.m. We could just touch her hand, Elena said, just to see what happens. And if nothing happens, then we go back to our jobs and pretend this conversation never took place. And if something does happen, Elena smiled, and Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. Then we make history. The next 3 minutes stretched like eternity. Marcus found himself studying every detail of the alien figure's face, memorizing the elegant curve of her features, the intricate patterns that decorated her skin. When the security field finally flickered and died, he moved without conscious thought. His hand hovered over the crystalline surface of the cocoon. This close, he could see that it wasn't solid, but composed of thousands of tiny crystalline filaments woven together in an impossibly complex pattern. And through those filaments, he could see the alien being's skin. opalescent and beautiful and somehow warm-looking despite the centuries of preservation. Last chance to back out, Elena whispered beside him. Marcus didn't reply. Instead, he pressed his palm against the surface of the cocoon. The crystalline material felt warm and yielding, almost organic. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the cocoon began to dissolve. It didn't crack or break or shatter. Instead, it simply melted away like morning mist, the crystalline filaments breaking down into particles of light that danced in the air before fading completely. The alien being lay exposed for the first time in millennia, her skin glowing with its own inner radiance. "My God," Elena breathed. The being's eyes opened. They were large and luminous, a deep violet color that seemed to hold the depths of space itself. They fixed on Marcus with an intensity that made him feel as if she was looking directly into his soul. When she spoke, her voice was like music, melodious and haunting. "You have awakened me," she said, her accent unlike anything Marcus had ever heard. "But do you understand what you have done?" Marcus tried to speak, but found his voice had abandoned him. The being sat up with fluid grace, her movements elegant and purposeful. She was even more beautiful than he had imagined, her alien features combining to create something that was utterly otherworldly, yet somehow familiar. "I am Zephira," she said, her violet eyes never leaving his face. "One screen of the astral dominion, bound in sleep until one with the gift of true sight should wake me." She tilted her head, studying him with obvious curiosity. "You are not what I expected. I'm Marcus." He managed to stammer. "And this is Elena. We work here, at the museum." Zephyr's expression grew troubled. "Museum? You display the dead and call it learning?" She looked around the gallery, taking in the other artifacts with growing distress. "What has become of my people? Where is my kingdom?" Elena stepped forward, her scientific training overriding her shock. "Your Majesty, how long do you believe? You've been sleeping. Time has little meaning in the dream state," Zephira replied. "But by the star's movement, perhaps 100 of your years." Marcus and Elena exchanged glances. "Your Majesty," Marcus said gently, "according to our dating methods, you've been sleeping for over 3,000 years. The color drained from Zephyr's already pale features. 3,000? No, that cannot be. My people, my kingdom." She stood suddenly, her movements sharp with panic. "I must contact the astral dominion immediately. My exile was meant to be temporary, a punishment for my transgression." "What transgression?" Elena asked softly. Zephyr's eyes grew distant and sad. "I fell in love with a human in the early days, when your species was young and my people still walked openly among the stars. It was forbidden, but I could not help myself. For my defiance of the Council's laws, I was sentenced to sleep until I learned the folly of loving a lesser race." The casual dismissal of humanity as a lesser race might have offended Marcus under other circumstances, but all he could focus on was the pain in Zephyr's voice. This was a woman who had been punished for love, exiled from everything she knew for the simple crime of following her heart. "Things have changed," Elena said diplomatically. "Humanity has advanced considerably. We've reached the stars ourselves now. Have you?" Zephira seemed genuinely interested. "And my people, do they still rule the galaxy?" The question hung in the air like a weight. Marcus realized that they were about to deliver news that would shatter whatever hope Zephira had of returning to her old life. "We've never encountered your people," Elena said gently. "As far as we know, you're the first alien being we've found." Zephira stared at her for a long moment, then sank back onto the platform that had been her bed for millennia. "Gone," she whispered. "All of them gone." Marcus felt his heart break at the desolation in her voice. Without thinking, he reached out and took her hand. Her skin was warm and incredibly soft, and he felt a shock of connection that went far beyond the physical. "You're not alone," he said. "We're here. We'll help you." Zephira looked up at him, tears glistening in her violet eyes. "Why? You don't even know me." "Because," Marcus said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice, "some things transcend species, compassion, kindness, love." For a moment, Zephyr's expression softened. Then suddenly, her eyes widened in alarm. "No." She breathed, the awakening signal It has been sent. What signal? Elena asked. When I awoke, a message was transmitted across the galaxy. Any surviving astral dominion settlements would have received it. Zephyra stood again, her movements urgent. They will come, and when they discover what has awakened me. What? Marcus asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Zephyra turned to him, her beautiful face grave with worry. They will come to reclaim me, and they will consider any who helped me to be enemies of the Dominion, as if summoned by her. Words. A low humming filled the gallery. The lights flickered, and Marcus felt a strange tingling sensation in the air. Elena's research equipment began beeping frantically. What's happening? Marcus asked. Zephyra closed her eyes, her expression pained. They are coming, faster than I thought possible. She opened her eyes and looked directly at Marcus. You awakened me with kindness, but by doing so, you may have doomed your entire species. The humming grew louder, and through the museum's great skylights, Marcus could see the stars beginning to move. Elena Vasquez had always prided herself on her scientific objectivity, but watching an alien queen materialize from what she'd thought was a preserved corpse was testing the limits of her rational mind. The equipment in her research lab 3 floors below was going haywire, sensors detecting energy signatures that shouldn't exist, and the impossible woman before them was speaking of galactic civilizations as if they were as real as the morning coffee. Elena had forgotten to finish. We need to get you out of here, Elena said, her training finally kicking in. The museum's security system will have recorded everything in about 10 minutes. This place will be swarming with guards, researchers, and probably government officials. Zephyra looked confused. Government officials? Are your people not united under a single ruler? It's complicated, Marcus said, still holding her hand. Elena noticed he hadn't let go since the initial contact, and something about their connection made her chest tighten with an emotion. She didn't want to examine too closely. The important thing is, Elena continued, that there are people who would want to study you, possibly imprison you. We need to get you somewhere safe while we figure out what's happening. The humming sound grew louder, and now it was accompanied by a strange pressure that made Elena's ears pop. Through the skylights, she could see what looked like stars moving. Information, growing brighter and larger. They're entering your atmosphere, Zephyra said, her voice filled with dread. 3 ships, maybe 4. Scout vessels, but heavily armed. Your people? Marcus asked. What remains of them? Zephyra's grip on his hand tightened. They will not be happy to find me awake, and they will be even less pleased to discover that humans were responsible. Elena made a decision. That would have seemed impossible an hour ago. My apartment, it's 20 minutes from here. In the old district, the buildings are stone and metal. Maybe that will interfere with their sensors. Elena, we can't just. Marcus began. Can't what? Leave her here to be taken by whoever's coming down from those ships, or hand her over to our own government, to be dissected. Elena's voice was sharper than she intended. She's been asleep for 3,000 years, Marcus. The least we can do is give her a chance to understand what's happened to her world. Zephyra stood gracefully, her movements fluid despite the millennia of sleep. You would risk your safety. For a stranger, for someone not even of your species. You're not a stranger, Elena said, surprised by her own certainty. I've been studying your people's artifacts for 2 years. I feel like I know you. It was true, Elena realized. The countless hours she'd spent analyzing the alien technology, the fragments of art and culture scattered throughout the museum's collection, had given her a deep appreciation for the civilization that had created them. The beings who had crafted those beautiful, impossible artifacts had been artists, scientists, dreamers, not so different from humans in their fundamental desires and fears. Your people created beauty, Elena continued, her voice soft with wonder. The crystalline matrices that preserved you, the gravitational manipulation devices, the art that shifts and changes with the observer's perspective. Everything I've studied suggests a civilization that valued harmony, knowledge, and she paused, looking directly at Zephyra. Love. A smile touched Zephyra's lips, the first genuine expression of happiness Elena had seen from her. You understand. Few of my own people ever truly comprehended what we were trying to achieve. What happened to them? Marcus asked. Where did they go? Zephyr's expression grew distant. The astral dominion was not a single species, but an alliance of many worlds. We were the coordinators, the peacekeepers, but we were never the majority. When the Council decided that expansion beyond our core territories was necessary, there was disagreement, civil war. Elena guessed. Double quotes worse. Fragmentation. Some factions wanted to conquer, others wanted to retreat to our homeworlds and close ourselves off from the galaxy entirely. Still others believed we should integrate with the species we encountered, learn from them as they learned from us. Zephyr's eyes found Marcus's. I was part of the third faction. It's why I was drawn to humanity in the first place. The pressure in the air intensified, and Elena felt her teeth ache from the strange vibrations. We need to move. Now. They made their way through the museum's back corridors, Elena using her research access to bypass the main security checkpoints. The building was starting to show signs of whatever was happening outside. Lights flickering, electronic systems failing, and a subtle trembling that seemed to come from the very structure itself. The ships are landing, Zephyra said, her voice tight with concern. I can feel them. 3 vessels, as I thought. They're not military, but they're not peaceful either. What do you mean? Marcus asked. Recovery ships, designed to retrieve lost technology or lost people. Zephyra's pace quickened. They will scan the area, identify the source of the awakening signal, and then what? Then they will do whatever is necessary to bring me back to face judgment for my crimes. Elena's car was parked in the staff lot behind the museum, a small electric vehicle that suddenly seemed pathetically inadequate for an escape from alien forces. But as they approached it, Elena noticed something odd. The car's electronics were functioning normally, unaffected by whatever was disrupting the museum's systems. Interesting, Zephyra murmured, running her hand along the car's surface. Your technology has advanced more than I thought. This vehicle uses principles that were theoretical when I was last awake. It's just a car, Marcus said, but Elena noticed how he watched Zephyra's every movement, fascinated by her alien perspective on their mundane world. Nothing is just anything, Zephyra replied with a smile. Your species has learned to work with electrical fields, gravitational forces, even quantum mechanics. You've become quite sophisticated. Elena felt a flutter of pride at the compliment, then wondered why the approval of an alien queen mattered so much to her. She started the car and pulled out of the lot, heading toward the old district through streets that seemed unusually empty. For a Tuesday afternoon, are people evacuating? Marcus asked, looking out the window at the deserted sidewalks. The ships are broadcasting a suppression field, Zephyra explained. Nothing harmful, but it encourages people to stay indoors, to avoid looking up at the sky. Your people are responding to it instinctively. Elena glanced in the rearview mirror and saw lights in the sky, moving in patterns that defied conventional aircraft. How long do we have? Hours, perhaps. They will be thorough in their search. Zephyra leaned forward, her hand coming to rest on Elena's shoulder. The contact sent a shock of warmth through Elena's body, and she had to fight to keep her concentration. On the road. Thank you, Zephyra said softly. Both of you. I know this is not what you expected when you woke up this morning. No, Elena agreed, but maybe it's what we needed. Marcus turned in his seat to look at her. What do you mean? Elena wasn't sure she could explain the feeling that had been growing in her chest since the moment Zephyra had opened her eyes. It was more than scientific curiosity, more than the thrill of discovery. It was a sense of completion, as if she'd been searching for something her entire life without knowing what it was. I mean, she said carefully, that maybe some encounters are meant to happen. Maybe you were meant to wake her up, and maybe I was meant to help. And maybe, Zephyra said, her voice carrying a note of wonder, I was meant to find you both. Elena's apartment was in a converted warehouse in the arts district, the kind of place that attracted graduate students and young professionals who valued character over convenience. The thick stone walls and industrial metal framework had been preserved during the renovation, creating spaces that felt both ancient and modern. This will do, Zephyra said, examining the apartment's structure with an appraising eye. The materials will provide some interference, and the age of the building gives it a certain resonance that may help mask my presence. Elena watched as Zephyra moved through her home, touching surfaces and examining objects with the careful attention of someone trying to understand an entirely alien culture. When she paused before Elena's bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines of well-worn volumes, Elena felt compelled to explain. "I studied anthropology before I got into artifact research," she said. "I've always been fascinated by how different cultures express universal human experiences." Human experiences, Zephyra repeated thoughtfully. Yet many of these concepts are not uniquely human. Love, loss, hope, fear, these are constants across all sentient species. "Is that why you fell in love with a human?" Marcus asked. "Because we weren't so different?" Zephyr's expression grew soft and distant. His name was David. He was a scholar, much like Elena here. He had come to one of our outer colonies to study our technology, and I was assigned to be his guide. She smiled at the memory. He was so eager to learn, so full of questions. Your species was much younger then, just beginning to reach beyond your home world, but his mind was sharp and his heart was open. "What happened to him?" Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew. "When the council discovered our relationship, they gave me a choice. I could return to my duties and never see David again, or I could be placed in stasis until I learned the folly of loving a lesser race." Zephyra's eyes filled with tears. "I chose sleep, believing that time would prove them wrong, that eventually the council would understand that love transcends species. And now you're awake," Marcus said, "and your people are coming to take you back." "Yes, but..." Zephyra looked at both of them, her expression uncertain. "I don't know if I want to go back. The world I knew is gone. My people are scattered, and I have found something here that I didn't expect." "What?" Elena asked, though her heart was already racing with the possibility. "Hope," Zephyra said simply, "and perhaps something more." Before Elena could respond, the apartment's windows suddenly blazed with light. Outside, 3 sleek vessels were descending toward the city, their hulls gleaming with an opalescent sheen that reminded Elena of Zephyra's skin. The ships were beautiful and terrible, clearly alien but somehow familiar, as if they belonged to a dream she'd once had. "They're here," Zephyra whispered, and Elena heard both fear and longing in her voice. "We'll face them together," Marcus said, taking Zephyra's hand. Elena found herself reaching for Zephyra's other hand, completing a circle that felt natural and right. "Together," she agreed. Outside, the ships began to descend, and Elena realized that their quiet afternoon of discovery was about to become something much more complicated. Zephyra had dreamed of home for 3,000 years, in the liminal space between consciousness and oblivion. She had revisited the crystal spires of her home world, the singing gardens where her people gathered to share knowledge and beauty, the vast libraries where the accumulated wisdom of a dozen species was preserved in living memory crystals. Now, standing at Elena's window and watching the ships of her people descend toward the human city, she felt only a hollow ache where homesickness had once lived. The beings coming to retrieve her were strangers, representatives of a civilization that had condemned her for the simple act of loving someone they deemed inferior. "Are you afraid?" Elena asked softly, her hand warm in Zephyra's. "Terrified," Zephyra admitted. "I have been away from my people for so long that I no longer know what I am to them. Am I still their queen, or am I simply a relic to be collected and catalogued?" Marcus squeezed her other hand. "You're not a relic. You're a person with rights and choices. Human concepts," Zephyra said with a sad smile. "My people never developed the same emphasis on individual freedom. We were always collective, always thinking in terms of what was best for the whole rather than what was best for the one." "Maybe that's what needs to change," Elena said, her voice fierce with conviction. "Maybe that's why you were meant to wake up now, in this place, with us." The ships were closer now, their hulls reflecting the afternoon sunlight in patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living things. Zephyra recognized the design. They were seeker vessels, used by the Council's recovery teams to locate and retrieve lost artifacts, missing persons, and other assets deemed valuable to the Dominion. "They're beautiful," Elena breathed, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. "They are," Zephyra agreed. "My people always believed that function and form should be unified, that beauty and utility were inseparable." Even our weapons were works of art. Their weapons? Marcus asked, his voice tight with alarm. Everything my people created could be a weapon if necessary, Zephyra said. But these ships are not here to destroy. They are here to retrieve. You, Elena said. Yes, and anyone who might have information about my awakening. Zephyra turned from the window, her expression grave. I need to go to them. If I surrender myself willingly, they might be lenient with you both. No, Marcus said immediately. We're not letting you face them alone. You don't understand, Zephyra said, her voice rising with frustration. These are not your people. They don't think like you do, to them. You are barely sentient beings who stumbled into something beyond your comprehension. They will not hesitate to erase your minds. If they believe you pose a threat to the Dominion. Elena stepped forward, her eyes blazing with determination. Then we need to make sure they don't see us as a threat. How? By showing them that humanity has evolved since you've been sleeping. That we're not the primitive species they remember. Elena moved to her computer, her fingers flying over the keyboard. I've been working on a translation protocol for the artifacts in the museum. If I can establish communication with them, maybe we can negotiate. Zephyra felt a spark of hope. You've learned to read our language, some of it. The basic mathematical concepts, the scientific notation, even some of the artistic symbolism. Elena pulled up a complex diagram on her screen, showing the intricate patterns that decorated many of the alien artifacts. It's not perfect, but it's a start. Elena, that's Zephyra studied the translation matrix, her eyes widening with amazement. This is incredibly sophisticated. You've identified grammatical structures that took our own linguists centuries to codify. I had good source material, Elena said with a smile. Your people left detailed records. A low thrumming sound filled the air, and the apartment's lights flickered. Outside, the three ships had taken up positions around the city, their hulls pulsing with a soft, rhythmic glow. They're scanning, Zephyra said, looking for the source of the awakening signal. How long before they find us? Minutes, perhaps. The signal is strongest here. Where I first awakened, Zephyra moved away from the window, her movements graceful despite the obvious tension in her body. I need to make contact before they begin more invasive methods. What do you mean? Marcus asked. If they can't locate me through passive scanning, they will begin active searches, mind probes, reality distortions, temporal sweeps. Your people won't be able to resist such techniques. Elena saved her work and closed the computer. Then we go to them, Elena. No, Marcus said. It's dangerous. More dangerous than letting them tear apart the city looking for her. Elena shouldered her laptop bag and moved toward the door. I'm not saying we surrender. I'm saying we negotiate from a position of strength. What strength? Zephyra asked. You are three individuals facing the technological might of the astral dominion. We have you, Elena said simply, and we have proof that humanity has advanced beyond what your people remember. That has to count for something. The thrumming sound intensified, and now it was accompanied by a high-pitched harmonic that made Zephyra's teeth ache. She recognized it. The ships were preparing to establish a communication link. They're trying to contact me, she said. I can feel it. A presence at the edge of my consciousness. Answer them, Elena said, but make sure they know you're not alone. Zephyra closed her eyes and opened her mind to the familiar sensation of psychic contact. Immediately, she was flooded with voices, not spoken words, but pure thought transmitted across the void. Zephyra. We have found you. The mental voice was cold, formal, utterly without warmth. She recognized it as belonging to Councillor Thane, one of the hardliners who had voted for her punishment centuries ago. Councillor, she replied, maintaining the proper protocols despite her personal feelings. I acknowledge your presence. You will come to us immediately. The contamination must be assessed and contained. Contamination. Zephyra felt a flare of anger. I am not contaminated. I am awakened. You have been in contact with the primitive species. Your awakening was caused by their interference. Both factors constitute contamination under council law. The humans are not primitive, Zephyra projected, her mental voice growing stronger. They have advanced considerably since our last contact. They have developed technologies, art, and social structures that rival our own. There was a pause, and Zephyra felt the weight of multiple minds conferring beyond the range of her perception. When Thane's voice returned, it carried a note of dismissive disdain. Impossible. The humans are barely beyond their planetary boundaries. They have no true understanding of the forces they manipulate. Then you will be surprised by what they have accomplished. Zephyra replied, I request permission to bring representatives. To demonstrate their capabilities, you request nothing. You are under council authority and will comply with our directives. I am still Queen of the Astral Dominion. Zephyra projected with all the authority she could muster. My rank gives me the right to present evidence before any judgment is passed. Another pause. Longer this time. When Thane's voice returned, it was reluctant but formal. Very well. You may bring to representatives, but know that any deception or threat will result in immediate termination of all parties. The connection severed, leaving Zephyra with a pounding headache and a sense of foreboding. She opened her eyes to find Marcus and Elena watching her with concern. Well, Elena asked. They've agreed to meet with us, Zephyra said. But they consider humanity to be a contamination that needs to be contained. Contamination? Marcus's voice was sharp with anger. It's not personal, Zephyra said, though she knew how inadequate that sounded to them. Any influence from outside the Dominion is potentially dangerous. They've been isolated for so long that they've forgotten how to interact with other species. Then, we'll remind them, Elena said. We'll show them what humanity has become. The three ships began to move, taking up a triangular formation above the city center. A beam of golden light descended from the central vessel, creating a circle of illumination in the plaza outside the museum. That's our cue, Zephyr said. They're establishing a meeting ground. As they prepared to leave Elena's apartment, Zephyra found herself looking at her two human companions with a mixture of gratitude and growing affection. Marcus, with his quick wit and generous heart, reminded her of David in ways that both comforted and pained her. Elena, with her brilliant mind and fierce determination, represented everything she had hoped humanity might become. Whatever happens, she said, taking both their hands, I want you to know that waking up to find you both has been the greatest gift of my very long life. This isn't goodbye, Marcus said firmly. We're going to figure this out together. Together, Elena agreed and squeezed Zephyra's hand. As they walked through the strangely empty streets toward the museum district, Zephyra felt something she hadn't experienced in centuries. Hope for the future, not the future her people had planned for her, but a future she might choose for herself. The golden beam of light grew brighter as they approached, and Zephyra could feel the presence of her people waiting within it. Soon, she would have to choose between the world she had known and the world she was discovering. But for now, she was not alone, and that made all the difference. Professor James Thornfield had been waiting for this moment for 47 years. Not consciously, perhaps, but with the deep intuition that comes from a lifetime spent studying the spaces between official history and hidden truth. The call from the museum had come at 3:17 a.m., rousing him from dreams of ancient languages and forgotten civilizations. Professor, you need to come immediately. The eternal sleeper is gone, and there are ships in the sky. He had dressed quickly, his arthritic hands moving with surprising efficiency as he gathered the documents he had hoped never to need. The folder was thick with photocopies, handwritten notes, and photographs that officially didn't exist. At the top of the stack was a letter written in his own hand 47 years ago, sealed and marked, to be opened only in the event of the awakening. The streets were empty as he drove toward the museum, the morning sun casting long shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources. Above the city, three ships hung in the sky like opalescent tears, beautiful and terrible in their alien perfection. Professor Thornfield had seen ships like these before. Once, in 1976, in the desert outside Roswell, when he had been a young graduate student accompanying his mentor on what was supposed to be a routine archaeological dig. What they had found instead was a crash site, and a dying alien who had pressed a device into his hands and whispered urgent words in a language that had taken him decades to translate. The Queen sleeps, the alien had said. When she wakes, the Watchers will come, guard the knowledge, prepare the children of Earth. He had spent the next 47 years doing exactly that. pursuing a career in ancient history that gave him access to archaeological sites and artifacts, quietly documenting evidence of alien contact throughout human history. Waiting for the day when his real work would begin, the museum plaza was bathed in golden light, and within that light, he could see four figures, 3 humans and 1 unmistakably alien form. Even from a distance, he recognized her from the ancient texts he had studied, tall, elegant, with the opalescent skin and graceful movements. That marked her as one of the astral dominion's ruling caste, Queen Zephyra, the sleeper, the one whose awakening would signal either humanity's elevation to galactic citizenship or its destruction. Professor Thornfield, he turned to find a young woman approaching, her face flushed with exertion and excitement. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore the simple gray uniform of the museum's research staff. "I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez," she said, extending her hand. "I've read your papers on pre-Columbian contact theories. We need your help." "I know why you need my help," Thornfield said. Accepting her handshake, "The question is whether you're prepared for what I have to tell you." Elena's eyes widened. "You know about her, about the astral dominion." "I know about all of it," Thornfield said, patting the folder under his arm. "I've been preparing for this day since before you were born." They walked together toward the golden light, and Thornfield felt the weight of nearly 5 decades of secrecy lifting from his shoulders. Finally, he could speak the truth about what he had discovered, about the hidden history of human-alien contact that had been systematically suppressed by governments and institutions around the world. "The ships," Elena said, glancing nervously at the sky. "Are they hostile?" "That depends entirely on what happens in the next few hours," Thornfield replied. "The astral dominion has been watching humanity for millennia, waiting to see what we would become. Queen Zephyra's awakening is a test, Dr. Vasquez, a test that will determine whether humanity is ready to join the galactic community, or whether we need to be contained." "Contained?" Thornfield's expression grew grim. "The astral dominion has dealt with aggressive species before. They prefer peaceful integration, but they will not hesitate to limit a species' development if they believe it poses a threat to galactic stability." As they drew closer to the golden light, Thornfield could see the other to humans more clearly. A young man with kind eyes and an air of bewildered determination. The one who had awakened the queen, if the reports were accurate, and beside him, the queen herself, more beautiful than any of the ancient texts had described. "Professor," the young man waved them over. "Are you here to help?" "I'm here to provide context," Thornfield said, introducing himself. "I'm James Thornfield, and I've been studying the astral dominion for most of my adult life." "Studying us?" Queen Zephyra's voice was melodious, but Thornfield could hear the surprise in it. "How we left no records of our presence on Earth. With respect, Your Majesty, you left many records. They were simply hidden or dismissed as mythology." Thornfield opened his folder, withdrawing a photograph that showed carved stone figures with elongated limbs and opalescent skin. "This is from a temple complex in Cambodia, dated to approximately 800 CE. The local legends speak of star people who came to teach humanity the arts of civilization." Zephyra studied the photograph, her eyes widening. That's Keeper Valdris. She was assigned to monitor humanity's development in the eastern regions. "And this," Thornfield continued, showing her another photograph, "is from the Nazca lines in Peru, where you were found. The geoglyphs aren't just art. They're landing patterns designed to guide astral dominion ships to specific locations." "How do you know all this?" Marcus asked, his voice filled with wonder. "Because I met one of your people," Thornfield said, looking directly at Zephyra. "In 1976, I encountered a crash survivor who gave me a device and told me to prepare for your awakening." From his folder, he withdrew a small crystalline object that pulsed with inner light. Zephyra gasped, her hand flying to her throat. "A memory crystal," she breathed. "They're incredibly rare. What message does it contain?" "I don't know," Thornfield admitted. "It's keyed to your species' biology. I've been waiting 47 years to find someone who could activate it." The golden light around them suddenly intensified, and a new voice spoke from the air itself, cold, authoritative, and utterly without warmth. Enough. The Queen will board our vessel immediately. The contamination assessment will begin. Contamination? Thornfield stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of decades spent in academic debates. Your Majesty, with respect, I believe you are operating under outdated assumptions about human development. You will not address the Council directly. Primitive, the voice replied. You exist at our sufferance. I exist, Thornfield said calmly, as a representative of a species that has achieved faster-than-light travel, quantum computing, and genetic engineering.